coercion, manipulation, brainwashing. All of these tactics were incorporated into the Jonestown Massacre, which I'm here to inform you guys about today, which took the lives of 918 people in one day in 1978 in Jonestown, Guyana, South America. Now, how did this large loss of American civilian life occur in modern America? Well, I want to dive into that today with you guys, and I'm explaining the origins of the People's Temple, the cult that was present in Jonestown Massacre itself, and the actual aftermath. But specifically, I would like to dive into Jim Jones, the founder, and how he came to be with Jonestown itself. So Jim Jones, based on an article written by History Channel historians in 2010, dives into the formation of the People's Temple and the creation of Jonestown itself. Jim Jones was born 1931, May 13th, in Crete, Indiana, rural countryside. He was born during the Great Depression, so he's in a shack with zero plumbing, very limited supplies, jobless parents. And to occupy his time during that, he read lots on Karl Marx, Adolf Hitler, Gandhi, and Joseph Stalin. And he incorporated lots of those readings into his own personality because he was very limited on his reading supplies, so he took in what he could. And through incorporating all that, he also had an obsession with death, as regarded by his peers. And this obsession with death was quoted weird by his peers, and he was very obsessed. And incorporating this obsession with the afterlife and with his ideas, now known as communism and socialism, he gained his own perception of those ideas and pushed them forward until past his college life, where he later became a minister. In becoming a minister, he thought, how do I get my ideas pushed through a certain medium that will get people to listen? And no better way for him than he thought was religion. And what he did was he became a minister in the 1950s and went across Indiana, going through various congregations, various faith healing services, trying to figure out how do all these ministers bring people together to go for God, for religion. And he learned from Father Divine, a reverend friend of his, that uniting people against a common enemy, in this case sin or misdeeds in religion or Christianity specifically, would bring people together. And through things like miracle work, or fake or not, miracle work in Christianity, really inspired people to listen and to believe in these ministers. Picking up on that experience, Jones was able to create his own church, the People's Temple, in the early 1970s. And he was able to gain more public support through voting for politicians to gain financial funds, legal and medical services for free, so people would come in and be awed by what he was doing, had a free dining hall for the poor. All of these things, along with a racially integrated demographic, brought so many different sects of people in and made his church stand out and for people to believe and follow him. With all this trust enveloped in the public, he is now able to move his spot to Guyana, South America, and call that Jonestown, where he built up his town. And through building up that town, he wanted to create his socialist utopia. That was his main goal for creating Jonestown. And when he created Jonestown in the early 1970s, his goal was... Actually, I'll read a part from here. So this is from a direct account from an Associated Press reporter, Ryderman Tim. Details the ambush on 1978 Democratic Senator Leo Ryan, who entered Jonestown trying to investigate the behind the scenes of Jonestown and why it was so, and what the terror was behind it, behind the massacre, what led up to it. So in doing so, Leo Ryan was able to expose what was going on behind the scenes of Jonestown and how Jim Jones' manipulation was truly working, how the inner workings of Jonestown led to the massacre, and how he was able to manipulate and coerce so many people. What Ryan learned was that there was many long hours of labor. The cult followers had their telephone and letters censored. They could not contact their relatives. Their medical records and passwords and all their belongings were confiscated. They were forced to call Jim Jones father, and they were all called children, and they were constantly being patrolled by armed guards, watching their every single move, and they had long congregations that followed way in the late hours of the night. And in doing so, Ryan and his team, with Tim Ryderman, the reporter for Associated Press that did the account on Ryan's ambush during Jonestown, found that there's a group of defectors, many people that wanted to leave Jonestown, believing that it was not a safe environment for them, believing that, or realizing for them that they were being completely manipulated and doing stuff that they did not want to do. Part of the scariness behind it was that they were doing mock suicide trials in case that they were going to be exposed. And Tim Reiterman, found out that Jim Jones was on to Ryan's team on his investigation and was already skeptical of letting him in. So at this point, Jim Jones wanted to act fast. And as this was escalating, what happened was, and I'm going to show you guys some pictures here. So if you can avert your eyes, it gets a little gruesome here. So what happened was that when Ryan, the senator, and defectors were trying to leave, what happened, unfortunately, was an ambush on them. And you can see here, Ryan and his team and the defectors were shot down trying to board this plane here. And this picture I'll get to in a bit. This is the aerial view of aftermath of that massacre. And seeing this, Reiterman, who barely escaped with some gunshot wounds, was in complete awe of what happened. And through seeing that, he realized that Jim Jones was doing everything he could to protect his utopia, even taking the lives of people that were investigating him. And and that same day, after Reiterman escaped from the Jonestown, Jim Jones called all of his cult followers together and decided it was time for what he deemed the Revolutionary Act, what they had been practicing in the mass suicide or mock suicide trials. And what he did was he injected first the children with syringes filled with a deadly concoction of cyanide, grape juice, and sedatives, instantly killing the children, and the adults soon followed after, voluntarily for the adults. Now, some did try and flee, but they were met with bullets by some of the armed guards. And the total of that was 918 people dead, 300 of them being children. And at this point, the aftermath was a complete cultural shock. And I want to dive into more about the first responders' response to that. As a New York Times article by Copsa A in 2018 accounts the grimly details about the aftermath of Jonestown from the perspective of first responders who had to retrieve the scattered corpses. Many of the first responders who were part of the U.S. Army had to get the scattered bodies across Jonestown. And they were left with horrid memories of they found children that was just a horrid sight to find for part of the remains. And many people were left up all nights after their dischargement with thoughts of that. They were greeted, unfortunately, with some of the humans that had decomposed. 200 of the bodies were decomposed past identification for their relatives. And it was those thoughts that the responders had that caused some of them to have what is now called PTSD until after their dischargement. Unfortunately, back then it was only called shell shock and only related to people that were in the Army after wartime in Vietnam. And what this meant as a cultural shock to the United States was that a little fact that I'll go into, and another statistic that I failed to mention, I apologize for that, was this was the second worst loss of American civilian life up until 9/11, which is now regarded as the worst. And through that, you could see how tragic and how horrific such an event could have occurred by one singular man that pushed humanity in the wrong direction. And it was found later in his autopsy that Jim Jones, who died from a self-inflicted gun wound during the massacre, was addicted to drugs, narcotics and painkillers especially. And it just goes to show how someone, and I forgot to mention this, I apologize, that his peers and his guards called him delusional, insane, increasingly paranoid, and they knew about his drug addiction, and he's still able to force and manipulate so many people on that addiction to committing such a large massacre. A voluntary massacre, if I might add again. And it goes to show how Jim Jones's origins, the massacre and the aftermath, were all birthed from one man, all birthed from one man's few ideas to spread his views through religion, and how he can totally abuse the religious system in America and how he completely demolished everyone's viewpoint on how religion should work and how cults worked, and his became the golden standard for how cults can turn bad and how religion can turn bad if abused incorrectly, or abused correctly, sorry. And it just goes to show how humanity can get pushed in such a wrong direction, and how Jim Jones and that massacre will be known in America as a grave tragedy for the rest of our days. Thank you.